Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to Amplify, the CQI Deming Special Interest Group interview series, where we interview Deming practitioners and share insights from the work of Dr. W.E. Deming. Today, we are discussing insights into the forces of destruction and variation. And I'm here with Dr. Jackie Graham. So welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. I'm still
Right.
drinking my tea. Hang on a sec.
Well, I'm sitting. So here in Jamaica, it's actually, let me see, it's 4 p.m. now. So for you in Australia, it's like what?
8:05 in the morning.
Oh boy. Yeah, you really need your cup of food just right now.
Yeah, so I'm still drinking my cup of tea. Right.
So we tend to like to be conversational in these in this interview series. So but before, I just want you to probably introduce yourself to the audience. So can you share with us a little bit about who is Dr. Jackie Graham, and how have you become known to be synonymous with Deming's work and so on?
So I'm a consultant in quality and productivity improvement, and I have an engineering background that's also statistical. So I completed a doctorate in the application of statistical and quality improvement methods in the automotive industry. Now, this was before ISO 9000, British Standard 5750. It was when all that kind of stuff was just getting started. I've been working as a consultant for over 30 years in many industries: government, transport, health, education, as well as manufacturing, banking, and telecommunications. I was delighted to be awarded the Durham Medal by the Australian Organisation for Quality just over a year ago for my work in business improvement in Australia and this region. So I studied quality improvement statistics, and I was really attracted to the tools because I could apply them and I could get things done and I could make improvements. Towards the end of my when I was studying my doctorate, I was given the opportunity to go and see Dr. Deming. He was touring in the UK, and I had the opportunity to attend his seminar. And the lead in that seminar was Dr. Henry Neve, who I know you know, Chris. And the world changed for me. The whole way I thought changed. It just stood on its end. He made me just think so differently. Basically, I could see I had these jigsaw pieces, and what Dr. Deming was able to do was show me what the picture looked like, showed me the puzzle, make it all make sense. And the way I saw the work I was doing completely changed, from helping people improve on specific things to helping others lead their organizations to improve their organizations. So from specific tasks to more leadership, sustainability, and helping organizations thrive. So at that first seminar, I introduced myself to Dr. Deming when I was having my book signed, and he was very interested in I was doing my doctorate, and we had lunch together. And then after that, he asked if I would do some work with him, and I've assisted him in seminars all over the world. And I have also done consulting work with Dr. Deming since that time. So that was the last 5 years of his life, basically. I got to share portions of that, which was wonderful.
Awesome. Pretty interesting story, especially I guess that is probably something that everyone, when you start to interact with the work of Dr. Deming, your world really changes, especially in quality, where we often think that it's about the tools and the hammers and the nails and documentation and all of these sort of things. So share with us why you believe that CEOs, leaders, quality professionals, practitioners need to better appreciate just Deming's system of profound knowledge, and what insights can you share with us that makes profound knowledge so powerful as a way of thinking.
Right. So I just want to put it in context. I know most people listening will probably know this already, but he developed the system of profound knowledge so that people could understand how he thought. So things like, where did the 14 points come from? It comes from the system of profound knowledge. So if you understand how the system of profound knowledge works, you can understand how all these other theories come from. And he wanted people to be able to develop the 15th point, 16th point, 17th point by applying his way of thinking. So it was to help him understand. But it also, what it does do is it gives you that holistic mechanism of thinking, so that the system of profound knowledge enables people to view their organizations differently. It's as a whole, not in parts. It helps you understand how it works. It helps you understand where the weaknesses are in your organizations. It's very customer focused and helps you understand what they really need, as opposed to what meeting expectations. That helps you understand the meaning of data. Are you collecting the right data? Whether the response of the organization is appropriate to that data, and how the organization learns. Does your organization learn is a great question, right? Do you learn? And how do you improve? And how do your people contribute to that? And how we exist as a company depends on the people who work for us and enjoy being at work. And so the system of profound knowledge is that holistic approach. It's not a piece of this or a piece of that, or a fad or a program. It's a holistic approach. It's not a concept. It's a way of working, a way of living and thinking. So what leaders get from profound knowledge is that holistic understanding of their organizations and all aspects of their business. I think a real common mistake is to say, oh, well, I really get systems, so I'll be really systems focused, and people will dive down an element of profound knowledge, shying away from the bits they don't understand so well, right? So when I met Dr. Deming, I had stats background, I had systems background, I've been teaching statistics to suppliers of General Motors. So I had that teaching element and that learning element and that improvement element. And Dr. Deming said, your psychology knowledge is weak, fix it. So, so you actually have to get a balance across all of that. So then I had to work on that to understand that element. And I think people tend to focus on the bits that they're good at and not understand the bits that they're not so good at, and how you don't have to be amazing at all aspects of profound knowledge. What you have to understand is the bits that you're good at and the bits that you're not good at, and get help with the bits that you're not good at. But you need that holistic approach.
I mean, powerful insight. So again, we also here discussing the forces of destruction in particular. And Dr. Deming bemoaned this overemphasis on the use of extrinsic motivation and its negative consequences on the individual and the system. And, especially in particular, how it forces out cooperation and other factors necessary for lasting quality and transformation. So, I mean, we are so committed to gold stars and rewards and rating and ranking persons. Can you share with us some of your views on what Dr. Deming to the forces of destruction?
Yeah, and I think what disturbs me most is that I'm seeing an increase in these, what they would call motivators. So particularly in this part of the world, it's almost like Australia has been Americanized, in that we're getting a lot more. So people used to get paid a base salary, would get occasional bonuses. Now you get a tiny, tiny base salary, and most of the money you earn is on bonuses, right? So I'm seeing more and more of it. And I think it's a situation that goes on around the world, right? So we're putting carrots in front of people, usually in the form of bonuses. What does that tell you about them? So I need to put this carrot in front of you in order to get you to do your best. Wow, I've really just insulted you, right? How insulting that the organization I work for thinks I need a carrot for me to do my best. That's terrible. It's shocking. And what happens is everybody starts to get focused on the carrot, not on what they're trying to achieve to get the carrot, but the carrot itself. And so you get the carrot repeated and repeated, and it gets bigger. And if the carrot gets taken away, it's seen as punishment. So maybe an organization is in a position where it can't give bonuses. It takes the carrot away, and people feel like they're being punished. Well, hang on a minute, I'm not earning as much as I used to. I'm not getting that bonus. And people feel deprived by it. What I have seen is that if you give people targets and you say, you get this bonus if you hit these targets, people get focused on the target, not on the customer, not on the organization, not what's best for the organization as a whole, not on their co-workers, but on hitting the target. I'm going to give you an example. This is one of my favorite ones of this. So this is an organizational bonus. So you'd think, okay, this isn't even an individual bonus. This is an organizational bonus. So this is a train company. So they run the trains on behalf of the government. And they were given a bonus if their trains arrived at their final destination point on time, right? So when they weren't running on time, they would skip a station or 2 stations or 3 stations in order to get back on time. Whether there was people on the train who wanted to get off or whether there was people on the platform who wanted to get on was not their criteria. That was not built in, that they had to stop at every station. So they hit their bonus, but can you imagine? You stood on a platform waiting for a train and they just keep going past because they're running late.
Like what?
So the whole system gets stuffed up by the fact that you've got a bonus that people are going for. That's as an organization, they decided that this was a strategy. That's
So then
terrible,
customers are
right?
asking for rebates. We're busy paying rebates.
Exactly. A fellow Jerome medalist, Ron Gosling, he was talking to me the other day. He had a lovely example and he's happy for me to use it. So he said, I couldn't understand how the salesperson of the month was always the same guy. He said, I could not work this out. It was the same guy every month in, month out. And he said, I just couldn't work it out. And he said, I went into the admin area and I said, how come, I'm going to give him the name Bob so that nobody knows who he is. How come Bob's always got the sales? She said, oh, you need to go to dispatch and see what happens, right? So he goes down to dispatch and he discovers, she goes, go on a Friday about 5 o'clock. Friday at 5 o'clock, Bob was turning up with a slab of beer for the dispatch guys to make sure his orders got the priority the following week. So then everybody knew, oh, if you place your order with Bob, you're guaranteed to get it on time. So of course, Bob was the most popular guy, right? And he got bonuses and he was at least sharing some of that bonus out, right? But it just distorts the system, so you're distorting the system. You're no longer focused on your organization or your customers or your fellow workers. You concentrated on a bonus, a carrot. And if that carrot's dangling in the wrong direction, the whole of the organization is going to go in the wrong direction. Dr. Deming really tried to get people to think about whether this was a great idea. It does not treat people with respect. And that was something that was very important to Dr. Deming, was treating people with respect. He believed people should get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, and that everyone should enjoy the success of an organization. And if employees are not performing, then work on it. Giving them carrots is just a band-aid situation, right? So it's easy to turn something that you think is a great idea and push in the right what you think is the right direction, and just create destruction instead.
Yeah, I mean, it forces out cooperation, and cooperation is so fundamental to anything sustainable in quality or transformation or anything like that. But then there's this other.
So why would I cooperate with another salesperson to build the organization when that's actually going to mean that they might get the bonus, not me?
We wouldn't want that now, would we?
Wouldn't. No, we wouldn't.
So he also talks about over-justification, and what actually is over-justification? Because like the average quality professional out there, they probably never even heard of over-justification.
Right.
May not even have heard of forces of destruction, frankly. So why is it important that we understand, this whole concept of over-justification?
Right, so over-justification is rewarding someone who has acted from intrinsic motivation. What you're doing is changing it from something that is personally fulfilling to transactional. So, for example, giving someone financial reward for something that somebody's been doing for pleasure, and it can change the way the person feels forever. And a fabulous example that's been written about a lot is in America, they wanted to motivate more children to read, and they made a deal with a pizza company. And children were given a card, and they would go to the library and get a library book out, and they would get a stamp in their card, and they'd get another stamp in their card when they took it back and they'd read it. And you collect all your stamps, and then you went to this pizza outlet and get free pizza. Now, during the actual promotion, obviously kids were reading like mad, right? So that was a good thing, yeah? After the promotion finished, library loans went down and had not recovered 5 years later. So what you changed something was, you cannot teach love of reading by bribing with pizza, right? You can't teach somebody to love something by bribing them. And what we're trying to do is get people to feel fulfilled and enjoy their work and enjoy what they're doing and pay them fairly. But when somebody has done you a favor, you don't turn around and pay them, do you? If somebody has helped, carry your groceries to your car, right? So somebody helps carry your groceries to the car, you don't turn around and give them a tip. You know that they've done that. Yeah. So as soon as you give them a tip, that says, I'm better than you, doesn't it? I'm better than you. I can give you money. I'm paying you to. Suddenly you're being paid to do a service that you were just doing to help somebody out. It just changes the relationship entirely. And that's what over-justification is about.
So we know what we should not do. What should we do differently?
Treat people with respect. Goodness me, that doesn't sound very hard, but it seems to be these days. Pay people fairly. Another thing that's not that hard, right? But pay people fairly. Listen to them. Talk to them. Get to know your employees, right? It's like talking about performance appraisals. People like, if I don't rank people, how do I know who's the best? I'm like, you don't know who's the best in your organization? You need way more help than performance appraisal can give you, right? So get to know your people, involve them in the organization, understand how they contribute, help them understand how they contribute and what they do, how they impact on the customer. Help develop pride in workmanship. God, that's something that we seem to have lost, right? Pride in the work we do. Develop self-esteem, value your employees. When you ask people these days, what do you do? Quite often they go, oh, I'm just a blah, 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 blah. That, a few years ago now, I went to the 70th work anniversary employee, 70th anniversary. Think about that. This guy started by pushing a broom on a station, right? And he loved his station. He was station master still, and he was in his 80s, and he was still station master, and his pride in his station was incredible. And he would tell you, I work for the railways, I'm station master of XYZ station. That whole pride we seem to have somehow lost. When something goes wrong, we tend to blame people. It's Fred's fault. We don't look at the system, understand what's wrong, get people, employees, people involved in understanding what went wrong, so we all discover it together. And the other thing I think we need to do more of is just saying thank you. When you get some good service and something works well in your company, say, you're doing a great job, thank you for doing that. And encouraging people. People will remember your thanks and your gratitude long, long time after you've paid a transactional amount, right?
True. These things may seem so simple, but they have been lost somewhere. All the manipulation that we see, and enticement. So we're going to go into another topic that is of critical importance, but I know it's a topic that you're also very passionate about: variation. And it is not to say that I wanted to pull out any component of the system of profound knowledge. But it is an area where there's a lot of challenge, and we also have, because there's a tool to assist, people get caught up in the tool and not the why for the tool. What is the reason? What is the purpose? So why is it important for us to understand variation? Why is understanding variation also important?
Right. So there's masses of data around, yet we lack information. Just because we've got a number doesn't mean to say we understand it. So we quote statistics right, left, and center. And we get obsessed by statistics that are meaningless. And I'll give you one that's I'm very passionate about. So you might know that I'm a bit of a sport person as well, right? So I love my football, but I also like my cricket. And I know that might be something that you share with me. So we get absolutely obsessed by cricket batting averages, right? But what do they actually mean? The way the commentators use them, you would think it's predicting the score the batsman's going to get, which is not even close, because if you look at a batsman's score, usually they have low scores and high scores, right? So if you talk to batters, which I have, right, and they'll say, oh, you know, it just wasn't in that day, or oh my goodness, the ball was looking like a melon, it was coming nicely onto the bat, I was really in tune, and then they go on, right? So what is the use of this batting average? Well, if you want to compare a cricketer from over here to a cricketer over there, comparing their batting average is helpful, right? But when they're walking onto the ground saying their batting average is this, is actually not very assisting. It doesn't really help you understand how they're going to perform, right? But if you listen to the commentators, they think it is, which is ridiculous, right? So we're very good at grabbing numbers and reading into them more than there actually is, right? And then the other problem is, you know, what I would prefer that they showed when the batters come on is a little distribution of what their batting scores are, right? So it'd be far more interesting to see that data and to see the variations. So then you might understand, ooh, he gets a lot where he's under 20 runs, but then the batter continues. After 20 runs, they're pretty consistent, and then they can usually go on. But that first 20 runs is their vulnerable time, or around the 50 mark, they've been out a lot of times in that 50. That would be such interesting information, but we don't portray it, right? So what we need to do is understand it and use that historical data. Now, if you had that, you'd be able to predict much more likely what is going to happen. The other thing Dr. Deming emphasized, which is it's as important as variation, is operational definitions. So everybody has a common understanding. I don't think most people understand how batting averages are calculated, for example. So Glenn McGrath who was an Australian bowler. You know, he had this batting average, which was huge. And at one point it was higher than his high score, because he would get protected at the other end the whole time because he was such a bad batsman, right? And he had very few outs. So then his total runs over number outs, which is actually the way they calculate the average. If you haven't been out very often, it makes that look very flattering, when in fact you could be really bad, right? I think the best example right now, or in the last few years, has been COVID cases. You know, we compare the number of COVID cases in one country to another when we can't compare them. Some countries only report PCR results. Some countries report rapids as well. Some countries don't even have rapids. Now, like in Australia right now, if I want a PCR, I have to go to a doctor and get a referral to get a PCR. So our numbers are completely kaput, and everybody's doing it differently in the world. So then to say, oh, they've got 100,000 in this country and 100,000 in that country, they must have a similar level of infection. It's not relevant. Even the cause of death is not the same. So if you have a person who's dying of cancer who catches COVID, in one country, they'll be put down as a cancer death. In another country, they'll be put down as a COVID death. There's lack of consistency across it. And as soon as that happens, you've got things that you don't understand in the data as well. Back to the question of variation. Yeah, we do tend to focus on averages, not on the variation. If you try to manage COVID based on an average, you would very rarely be right, because it peaks and wanes, and you have to be able to manage that peak and you have to work out what you're going to do with your resources during the wane. If you planned on the average, you would just be wrong all the time, most of the time. And most organizations have the same challenges. They will have peaks in their business and lows in their business. And unless they really understand how their business performs in terms of variation, their systems won't be there to cope with that. And that's really important. They tend to work on the norm, on the average. They don't tend to work on what do we look at our worst, what do we look at our highest or our lowest.
And you know, I think that gives a great segue into the other question in terms of we can have all the data, we can have some understanding of variation existing. We can use the tools, but we can still have a very poor understanding, which could lead to many losses and wasted efforts. You know, so what are some of the common management mistakes that result from this poor understanding of variation? And, you know, how could we really address, like, go beyond the tools to address the gap?
Right. So, yeah. So it's going back to what we were just talking about before, is the degree of variability. So if you've got overstretched resources or underutilized resources on both sides, they will lead to waste. So the under is very easy to understand. The overstretched, you know, I think every health system in the world is overstretched, and I think most systems through the world are seeing is that people are leaving that industry because they've been overstretched for years now, and they get to the point where they know they're going to snap. So I don't think people really understand it very well. They don't understand the degree of variation on their business. And when reports go to senior management teams and to boards and to leadership teams, it's often just averaged together and a summary of a month or a summary of a quarter. It's not the degree of variability that they've had during that time. And you have to measure some of those parameters in a way that you can see the variability to understand how to manage that business through and how to be prepared for that degree of variability. So an example is a customer of mine who works in council or shire setting, and they deal with a lot of the maintenance activities, and they have several different maintenance contracts. And in the winter, the northern part of Victoria, where there's a lot of snow, that's where all the tourists go. And in the summer, it all goes down to the coastline, obviously, to the beaches. And so they have resources that they can move between those locations to help overcome the changes, right? So when you've got lots of people, you have lots of requirement needs, you have lots of tourism and lots of tourism needs. And so they're able to move their people around to cope with the changes and the differences in the volumes of work. But people need to understand those in order to manage them. And I think quite often people don't. Organizations don't. They just look at the totality. They don't look at what's happening on a day-to-day basis on the ground for their employees. I don't think they look at it enough.
Yeah, we look at it, be busy looking at the results, but we don't look at the system or the process creating the results. So
Right.
that also segues into the other question on tampering. And, you know, what exactly is tampering? Because there's a lot of talk when we have to appreciate variation about tampering. So share with us some insights on tampering.
So tampering is overreacting to data. It sounds absolutely simple, but it happens all the time. People see a bad number and they feel like they need to do something about it, or they think it's a bad number, and so they change the system. But if it's normal variation, the system would have got better all on its own. An example of that's easy to understand that will be happening in most households is temperature control, and in most offices is temperature control, right? Somebody's a bit cold, so they turn the heating up. Somebody else then gets hot, turns the heating down. And it's interesting, they don't turn it up and down by a small amount. They turn it a couple of degrees, right? And so before you know where you are, so I had the great privilege of doing some work in Fiji, which I really enjoyed, right? But you'd go in this office and you didn't know whether you needed to take a jumper with you or a swimming costume, because it would either be a sauna or a freezer. And when I was teaching statistics and tempering, the site manager was like, oh, hang on a minute, this is exactly what's going on for me. So what he did was he put the temperature controller where everybody was fiddling with it, he changed to a dummy one and put a real temperature controller in a locked cabinet. And then the office was a beautiful temperature and people were playing with the temperature all day. And they were very happy because they were playing with the temperature. So they were tempering, but they weren't doing anything. And it's a really good example of tempering, right? You give people numbers, dots, dials, the ability to change things, they almost feel like it's their job to do it, right? So I was, one of the companies I work with, they make asphalt, and I was talking to several companies I work with make asphalt, but I was talking to the plant operator. It's a fully automated system and he's running it on manual. And I know it can't produce as good a result. He's like, but my job's to run the plant, you know, pressing go doesn't feel like I'm actually doing any work. I prefer to do the top buttons and dials, you know, because it feels like I'm actually doing something. But that's, you know, that's what tampering is. It's a lack of understanding of the variation. And when I sat down with this plant operator and said, look, here's your manual data and here's the automated data. As a customer, which one would you want? He said, oh yeah, I'll just press go in future, right? Because there was a huge difference in the data. So what we need to understand is the reaction of normal variability and not overreacting to those data points. But on the counter side as well, if something's really changed, we need to understand that and be acting on it. So you need to understand where those lines are. And it's not where your guts think it is. It can be statistically calculated so you know exactly what those numbers are.
Okay then. So I know that we can possibly discuss everything that we needed to discuss in like this hour or so. So I'm going to ask you now for some key takeaways from today's interview that you'll like us to take away and to absorb.
Okay, so this is hard because how do you give the key takeaways of Dr. Deming? It's just an impossible question to ask, but Dr. Deming had respect for individuals and organizations. And what he did was he put together the system of profound knowledge to help us create a better organization, a better place to work, and a better world. And it is just as relevant today as the time when he wrote it. So I was very privileged to be with him when he was putting the system of profound knowledge together. And I was working with him at that time. And he worked so hard to try and understand, how do I think? You know, and so profound knowledge, the systems, variation knowledge, psychology. He knew that these were the important things that we needed to grasp and understand. But more than the individual elements, it's how they relate to each other. So when you're working in variation, how that relates to people, how that relates to systems, how that relates to learning and gaining knowledge. And you can do that from any one of them. And I think it's really important to understand that the system of profound knowledge is relevant today, but you need to study and be proficient at all of them. You don't need to be expert. You need to be proficient at some of them and understand how you are going to get the expertise in the other areas, and then understand how they all relate.
It's about the system learning and it's about the individual learning. So finally, contact. So if someone or an organization heard something that was interesting to them in this interview session today, program Amplify, how would they engage Dr. Graham? How do they contact?
Okay, so I have my own company, Statistical Edge. It's a consulting company, so you can contact me through there. But I'm not hard to find. If you go Dr. Jackie Graham in Google and you spell my name correctly, C-K-I-E, rather than Y, you will find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to be contacted. People can reach out to me. That's great. So my email is jackie@statisticaledge.com.au. I would assume everybody listening to this would know how to spell statistical, but I spend a lot of time spelling it when I'm giving out my email address. But if people want to learn more about Dr. Deming and the system of profound knowledge, then I recommend the 12 Days to Deming, the self-paced study course that you've done, Chris. and many people we know have done. It's absolutely free, and it was put together by the amazing Henry Neve, who worked closely with Dr Deming. And there are also study groups, and if you want to get involved with those, we're kicking off another one in February, you'll be pleased to know. So we're doing the regular study groups. There's about 3 a year going from different parts of the world, and if you want to get involved, yeah, really happy to hear from people.
We can't really pay you for this or pay you for the thoughts or ideas that have been shared. We really do appreciate your commitment to learning and to supporting the learning of others. And for that, you know, we at the program Amplify also comprise of volunteers that, you know, do this to really just support, you know, the ongoing development of and sustainable development of our nations and of our people. So again, we really thank you and appreciate
You're very welcome. You know, I'm really happy to do this anytime. I work with Dr. Deming. I have an obligation. He gave me so much time, and he was so generous with his time to me, for me to learn. It's very important for me to pass that on. So I'm just paying it forward.
And don't worry, the next time I will actually schedule it probably an hour or two upward so that you don't have to get up so early in the morning.
Oh, no. This is a good time for me because it's before my phone starts going berserk.
Okay.